My common refrain regarding Super Heavy Samurai is that it has not produced any type of ripple in the meta because of poor deck design that does not compensate for the weaknesses of the deck. Super Heavy Samurai is not Tier 1, and I would never argue that it is, but it should see more competitive success, especially since the release of Peacemaker. With the release of Steam Train and some other new support, the Super Heavy Samurai deck design has shifted in a popular sense away from Big Ben and towards Steam Train, which is not a good idea in my opinion because while Steam Train does have a bigger body and more OTK potential, able to attack at 9600 instead of 7000 when backed up by a gauntlet, it has the same problems as Big Ben, the ability to easily be interrupted or negated, and it costs more to get onto the field, both in resources and consistency of deck design. The other two effects of Steam Train are rather irrelevant in my opinion because the card destruction is of little value due to the high attack point and OTK nature of Steam Train, and the spell trap banish ability is very inefficient because most of the advantages to synchro summoning in Super Heavy Samurai are derived from not having spell or traps in the graveyard. So basically, when you have spells and traps in the grave, it becomes much harder to put Steam Train on the field. Therefore, you can't take advantage of its clean up your graveyard esque effect. Overall, I think the best way to run Super Heavy Samurai is to focus on creating a meaningful field presence as much as possible in the early game, and then looking to OTK as much as possible through the middle game. I think a problem with the deck design is too much focus on synchro summoning and control through those synchro pieces due to the fact that it is too easy to interrupt those pieces after they're summoned. One of the major problems with the synchro strategy is that the biggest protection piece of the deck, Flutist, is unfortunately rather bad on its own due to its lack of an innate special summoning ability, due to its lack of ability to put itself into the graveyard somehow, and its general pathetic stats. Thus, unless Flutist is available in pretty much ideal circumstances, it creates more inefficiency and inconsistency than benefit in the deck when run at multiples. So, with that said, what does my updated Super Heavy Samurai deck look like? For the Super Heavy Samurai portion of the deck, I run 3 Super Heavy Samurai Thief for its ability to steal back row from the opponent, albeit due to the lack of quick play effect in this theft. Most of the time, Thief is just going to take the bullet, so to speak, for another future play, because no intelligent opponent is going to just let you activate Thief's effect to steal something he or she can use to remove Thief versus just letting you take it and use it against him later. So realistically, the only thing you'll ever reliably be able to steal are battle traps. However, because it can be special summoned and it is a level 8 or higher machine, 3 copies work well for this build. I run the Goldilocks number of 2 for Big Ben, as 1 copy is too inconsistent and too prone to DD Crows, and 3 copies are too bricky. 3 copies of Scales due to its ability to combo, establish field presence, and help board break due to its special summoning ability when your opponent has a big board and you have nothing. 3 copies of Soulpiercer, largely due to its searching ability, which kickstarts a lot of your combo and OTK sequences, and very rarely its piercing ability, and 3 copies of Peacemaker for its deck summoning ability. These Super Heavy Samurai are far and away the most important main deck Super Heavy Samurai since Daihachi is not available yet. For the remaining Super Heavy Samurai pieces, I run 2 copies of Trumpeter, for while this deck design moves away from being synchro heavy, Trumpeter is still a nice card due to its special summoning ability to set up Peacemaker or set up something like summoning a Big Ben from the hand and then having the ability to go into a Warlord. 1 copy of Drum for graveyard summoning. A second copy can be useful at times, but depending on the type of deck you're playing against, that second copy can sometimes create bad hands. So 1 copy in the main deck, 1 copy in the side deck. While the level 1 tuning standing is useful at times, especially for summoning Naturia Beast, the larger issue is most of the time you'll either be using it as a defensive measure or to crash into an opponent's monster and then summon a Big Ben from the graveyard. 2 copies of Gigaglove provides solid deck ordering and the possibility of defense and card advantage. The attack drop portion of the effect has been somewhat handicapped by link summoning though. However, it can still protect against a big direct swing and net a card. Gloves also has that nice psychological advantage to it in the capacity that your opponent knows it's in your graveyard. They're a little weary about just swinging directly willy-nilly, so to speak, because, oh, my guy's going to go to 0 attack, I'm not going to do any damage, and I'm going to give my opponent a +1. 2 copies of one of the newer cards in Helper, which is rather amazing in the graveyard. Its from hand effect is solid, increasing OTK probability and opponent trepidation in attacking any super heavy samurai when Big Ben is also on the field, but it really shines in the graveyard, turning a direct attack into a Big Ben, or at least the scales with a second super heavy samurai from the graveyard to create a wall. 1 copy of Battleball with another 2 copies side deck, because Ball does nothing against pendulum decks, link monsters, or decks that have some level of targeting protection. So while powerful, it is only valuable against certain types of decks, and if you just stack a bunch of multiples in your main deck, there's a good probability you're going to have a bunch of dead draws when you figure out, oh crud, my opponent's playing Spirals, or my opponent's playing Pendulum Magicians. So I think it's better to play precaution, playing that 1 copy. When you know Battle Ball can really wreck the opponent, then you side in those second and third copies for the next 2 games. 1 copy of Flutist for protection and a means to summon a Big Ben from the hand easily. For 1 copy, Flutist is definitely useful. It's when you get up to those multiple copies that I feel it starts to be more detrimental than beneficial. Finally, I run 1 copy of Guantlet as an OTK finisher card. Some may wonder why I don't run either of the level 5s in Transporter or Big Waraji. Remember, this deck build focuses away from heavy synchro plays, and both of these cards are centric in heavy Steam Train builds, but outside of turboing out Steam Train or Ninja, I feel they're rather bad. Unfortunately, Daihachi is still not out, otherwise that would definitely be in this build as well. And I don't run Magnet because it's just not valuable. I don't see a lot of XZ summoning, I don't do a lot of Link summoning, so putting that second card on the field, not huge value. Magnet has a little more value in that capacity in getting like a Warlord on the field when you're running a little more synchro heavy, but since I'm only running 3 level 2 tuners, that Warlord summoning off of a Magnet summoning another level 4 into that level 2 tuner doesn't happen very often in this deck build. For the non-super heavy samurai monsters, outside of the 1 copy of Eater of Millions to deal with annoying monsters that just can't be hit over, I run 2 separate hybrids. First, Machina or Machina in 3 copies of Gearframe and 3 copies of Fortress. I have said it before, and I'll say it probably till the end of Yu-Gi-Oh! Machina Fortress is one of the most underrated cards in the game. It is a fantastic secondary offensive weapon for this deck, especially for dealing with interruptions from cards like Firewall Dragon, for Fortress loves when its opponent has 2500 attack for its ability to double dip destructions. With numerous level 8 or higher machine monsters in this deck, special summoning Fortress from the graveyard is also rather commonplace. The second hybrid involves Gold and Silver Gadget at 3 copies each. Yes, it is not sexy or innovative, but the field presence the gadgets can produce due to their destruction summons effect really helps push through those rough patches when you don't draw as well as you could in this deck, in addition to having the extra bonus of the ability to special summon a card like Scales from the hand when it cannot special summon itself, and then that Scales can get something from the graveyard, and now you have greater field presence and the ability to make more interesting plays. Overall, one of the important goals of this deck design is to have a quality normal summons for every turn, and the Machina and Gadget portions of the deck help accomplish that. For those who want to freak out, now is the time to freak out. I run 3 copies of Lost Wind. Look, one of the biggest problems of this deck is a lack of interruption due to a lack of spell and trap accessibility. The dream of the OTK is nice, but unless you're facing an inferior deck or your opponent completely bricks, you're really not going to pull it off. This deck is going to commonly need 2 or 3 turns to finish off the opponent. That's why you need some form of interruption, because you're really not going to get it. The idea of stealing opponent spells and traps as a means to interrupt them using Warlord and Thief's effect is not to be too derogatory, but a cute idea. But in practice, it's incredibly inconsistent. I have frequently been an advocate for running 2 or 3 copies of Breakthrough Skill in this deck, and I feel that Lost Wind is just a better version of Breakthrough Skill. Some may be concerned about Lost Wind because it cannot voluntarily, in a sense, be removed from the graveyard. It needs your opponent to special summon from the extra deck. This concern is understandable, but Super Heavy Samurai loses to extra decks, not to main decks of basically any other deck outside of maybe Cosmos. Therefore, if the opponent is not summoning from the extra deck, this deck really should not lose unless it bricks pretty heavily, and it's kind of hard to brick with this build. Also, most of the no spell trap conditions of Super Heavy Samurai have to do with synchro summoning or synchro monster effects, and this deck attempts to move away from depending on these elements. So if Lost Wind is sitting in the graveyard, this deck is not as negatively affected as the standard Super Heavy Samurai build. Overall, the effect negation of Lost Wind, and by small amount the attack reduction, is very important for consistent victory percentages for Super Heavy Samurai. For the extra deck, I run 1 Super Heavy Samurai Steam Train King, 2 Super Heavy Samurai Warlords, 1 Super Heavy Samurai Stealth Ninja, 1 Coral Dragon, 2 Super Heavy Samurai Ogres, 1 Naturia Beast, 1 Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon. You can make it with 2 Machina Fortresses, which isn't that difficult to get on the field, and usually it's used to finish up. Your opponent sitting at 900 life points. You make Red Eyes Flare Metal. It's very improbable that they win from there on out unless they have a Kaiju. 1 Heavy Armored Train Iron Wolf, 1 number 41, 1 Castel, 1 Gaga Cowboy, and 2 Mrs. Radiant. The Radiants are useful as links because it's nice to be able to have an accelerated way of getting a Soulpiercer or a Gigagloves into the graveyard when you don't have a tuning option. I do not run Gear Giant X because the 2 monsters required to make it, I feel, are typically more valuable on the field than the resulting of a Gear Giant X and the search that you're going to get off it, in my experience. Overall, I feel the reason Super Heavy Samurais have had so little success is too many people focus on either the soul elements to combo for OTK or Turbo Steam Train, which creates significant inconsistency, producing a lot of trouble in breaking boards and providing almost no interruptions. So when you don't get that OTK, your opponent can basically just on their next turn just spit out all sorts of second wind combo plays against you and win the duel. The simple fact is that Steam Train variants would be great if quick play interruption didn't exist or was very rare, but instead it exists in this meta in droves, heavily limiting the value of a card like Steam Train because going first with this deck, that's tough, and Steam Train doesn't help you at all. This build uses Fortress as a secondary offensive element, which really puts in the work against a lot of decks due to the fact that if you target it with a monster effect, you get to pick something out of your opponent's hand after looking at their hand. If it goes to graveyard via battle, you get to destroy any card on your opponent's field. It's a very good card, if I haven't made that point clear. Obviously, Super Heavy Samurais will still have the issue breaking those god boards that have 3 or 4 interruption elements due to the lack of spell and trap board breaking options, but that's just a problem you're going to have to deal with when you play with the deck because that's just its big deficiency. Well, that is my Super Heavy Samurai deck. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.